Hi everyone and welcome to my craft room. I'm Ray and I'm going to share with you some of my ideas and things I do for my art journal. Okay, I'm just going to move the camera now so that you can see my art journaling pages. Is it going to stay there? Oh yeah, no, we're not staying in place today, just a minute. Just tighten it up for you. Okay, so here's my art journal. Art journaling is about colour and expressing yourself through colour and playing with your different things you've got. So I've been playing with my stamps, obviously, and this one was the pixie powders. So if you have a quick flick through, I can show you some of the different things that I have done. They're not all complex. They're not all arty-farty and weird and wonderful. Some of them are just coloured in pieces. Some of them are just stamped. Others are bits that you would normally put on a card. Some are collages, some string pulls, more sort of collage work. Now this is my collaging and bits. I keep all of the little bits that I chop off of everything, and I use it in my art journal. So everything from tiny little snippets that get chopped off your paper to bigger pieces, I keep everything because I use it in my art journal. Okay. And I also fussy cut things out, and I use ephemera quite a lot as well. So there's all sorts of different bits on them. So these are the ones that have been posted this week, so that you can see sort of the style of what we're looking at, which is mainly collage work at the moment. This was my play the other day, black gesso, oxides, and just see what happened. And I've got that far. This was yesterday's, more collage work, some stencil work, some ephemera and a play date. So what we're going to be doing today, this is what we're going to do today. I'm going to be doing this one with you. This is literally a inked background through stencils, some stamping, a little bit of collage work, die cuts, some spritzing, and I'm going to show you how I do my inking, how I make my spritz inks, and even how I make my own ephemera using these different stamps. So the first thing I'm going to do is stamp my typewriter, and as you can probably tell, it's stamped onto craft card. So here it is. I've put the stamp in already on a piece of craft card, and I'm going to be using VersaFine Clair ink. This is Nocturne. I like this to stamp with when I'm going to be spraying and doing all sorts of different sort of wet things, because it doesn't move with everything else. It stays in place, and it's easier to stamp with than stays on, because I'm not a particularly very good stamper. I don't have a very firm stamp. So there's my image. One of the other good things is I'm not too worried about it being a perfect image, because I'm going to mess it up. Do try and remember to clean your stamps off, because it does help you a bit later on when you do other things. A bit of a dry. Okay. So take that out of there. Right, now as you can see on this, it's got a white sheet of paper in it with typing on it. So what I did was I stamped it out on some cream card, and then with my scissors, I'm not too fussy about doing the fussy cutting, as it were, because I just want to stick this on to paper piece it. But I'm not going to try and cut round everything. I'm going to just sort of give myself some bits to guide me where it's going to go, if that makes sense. So I've got bits on it that aren't part of the paper, but it helps me to guide it into place. So a little bit of glue. Okay. Just stick that down there. That's that sorted for me for a minute. Okay, now also on the one that I've done, you'll see there's white on the highlighting areas, and I'll show you how I do that. A paintbrush and a gel pen. Lid back on the glue before it dries out on me. Okay, so I have a damp, my sponge is damp, okay, and I'm just going to put my gel pen down where I would like to put it, where I think I want it. And I use my damp brush just to pull the white along, and it just takes it where I want it to go. Okay, so it works like using a white pen, but because I'm putting it exactly where I want it, I can just drag it along and sort of fade it out and it not be too harsh. Whereas if I left it in with the gel pen, just as it was, it's quite very harsh white. Okay, so I'm just going to put a little bit there. And I don't have to be too exact doing it like this either. I can be a little bit more free with it. So I'm just going to put some where I think the brightness of the metal would normally show out. So I'm just doing a little bit. It's a nice way to make the stamp look a little bit complex, and it's a really nice thing to do when you're working on coloured cardstock and you're stamping things, and you'd normally have an area you would leave white. Well, you don't have that, but you can put that back in this way, which is quite a nice thing to do. And just put a little bits of white on it. Go all the way across here. There's the rule a bit. There you go. So that I would leave like that. So that's my little bit of twiddly painting, which is all I've done. Okay, now my next step is to make this more how it looks like a piece of an old image that's been hanging around for a while. Now I don't want it perfectly neatly cut out because I'm going to scruff it all up anyway, so it doesn't need to be absolutely perfect. Okay, so take my oddments out, put them in my scrap box, and I'm going to take the edge of my scissors and run this up here. So I'm sort of making my own ephemera this way. So now you can see it's got a roughed up edge, and I'm going to screw it up. Okay, so I'm just giving it a bit of a screw up, and I'm going to put that to one side for the minute and then get on with the next part of what I'm going to do. So here comes my book. Now you'll notice that my book pages seem quite stiff, and they're not normally. I tend to glue 2 pages together so that when I'm doing this little work, they are firm enough to hold what I'm doing. So if you're not careful, they can be a little bit on the whoppy side and not necessarily not strong enough to hold lots of different mediums. And I never know what I'm going to be putting on them as I go along. So I start off by gluing them together. Okay, so I'm just going to use some distress inks. This one is Speckled Egg, and I'm just going to roughly put some colour down. I'm not going to put it all in the same place, and I'm not going to be overly neat and tidy with it and trying to get it all to look wonderfully matching. I'm not really into that, if that makes sense. It wants to be quite sort of rough and ready, not too organised, not too perfect. Okay, so I've done some with that colour. Okay, and I'm now going to use a little bit of vintage photo and do similar, but not necessarily in the same places. So I'm going to go, I might overlap it a bit in a slightly different angle. Okay, put a bit down here. Oops, gone at a different angle there because I slipped it. Put a bit over the top of that one there. I'm just going to put it at a different angle so it sits differently. Okay, right, so you can see now how I'm building up a background pattern. I'm going to change my colour again, and this time it's going to be ice spruce, which is a nice grey. And I'm going to be filling in the areas where I haven't actually got any colour now as such. Okay, now if you're not, as you probably noticed, I'm not trying to do nice neat circles. Don't need to through my stencil. I'm not trying to get my edges all nice and neat. It doesn't do that for you in the same way. so it just helps a little bit, just to be a bit more sort of untidy. So there we go. I've just about a little bit there. There we are. That's my background so far. Now I'm going to change my ink because Distress ink is translucent, and I'm going to want a more opaque ink. Now for this I'm going to use the VersaFine Clairs this time. Okay, and I've got a different stencil. I'm just going to drop some bits down, and it will be slightly, you won't see the other colour underneath. Whereas when I've crossed over here, you can see that there's still blue underneath the brown. This one blots out the colour completely, so you won't know what it is you've got underneath it or where it's going to go. The one I'm using at the moment is Morning Mist, and it's a very nice soft grey, and it works quite nicely in this situation for what I'm doing. And again, because this is now a waterproof ink, it won't bleed like the Distress inks will if I decide to spray water all over everything. Okay, right, so I'm going to change colour again. I'm going to go for a brown. This one's Acorn, just so I've got a little bit of different colour coming out off an edge, and it's quite a definite browny colour, and quite rich this one is actually. Okay, so that's enough of that one. Okay, now I'm just going to change again, but this time I'm going to use Fallen Leaves, and I'm not going to go through with the stencil. I'm literally going to be just going around the edge. Okay, so we'll just put that in there. I'm just going to give a little bit of a dab. I'm not doing it neat and tidy because I don't need to, because I'm going to put some collagey bits on top of it. This is just to make sure I've not got any nasty cream bits hanging around that I forgot to cover. No, it's not that they are. It's a nice colour really, but it's just not what I'm looking for when I'm doing this work today. Right, so that's my background started. I'm now going to start collaging, which is basically, a collage is just putting bits of paper together where you think you might want them. So I have a scrap from something that had a map on it. I've got one here that's got different, like, looks like it's got different pieces of what they're called, adverts on them from something that I had. So I'm going to cut these up because I can use these to go in different directions. They don't all have to be going in the right way around so that you can read them. So I've trimmed that up, and I'm also going to use an old book page. Okay, now this book is a hardback book. You find you get different paper that is in different books. In the hardback books you tend to get a paper that is more likely to be acid and lignin free. So if you wanted to do this in your scrapbooking, you're more likely to get that sort of a paper in with your, I'm just tearing off the bits I don't want, which are the edges and things. So, and I'm just going to put these down where I roughly think I would like some bits of paper to be, and I'm going to put them at different angles, in different places. Right, so glue, let's start. Okay, so I'm literally playing. It is playing with different things, playing with different papers, playing with angles of work, thinking about, well, do I fancy that there? What? And if you don't like it, it doesn't matter. You can paint over it. Art journaling isn't about doing something in a specific way. It's not about you being an artist. It's not about you creating the best piece of work ever in the world. It's about you expressing yourself, having a bit of fun, playing with that new stamp you've just got, or the new paint or ink or whatever it is, seeing what you can do with it, and just enjoying yourself, having a little bit of fun and expressing what you've done. Okay, so there's nothing. So I've put those like so. Right, I've got a nice long strip here, and I like long strips. I do, and I tend to put them sort of through a page like so, and then I just trim off pieces. So I'm not necessarily keeping it inside my book either. So I'll have bits that go outside my book. They're not necessarily on the page, so they extend past it, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be where you think you should put it. I have a number, so I'm going to put that there because I fancy that one. It's nice and definite. I'll put my piece of map, put my map in. Okay, I'll put my map just here, I think. I tuck it under those words there, so it looks like it was meant to be there. Now you can see why the edge doesn't need to be tidy, because you're going to hide it a bit, but also it's nice that it's sort of looks a bit worn and not perfect, if that makes sense to you. Okay, I'm going to put that one coming across there, I think. There we go. I'll have another ad up here. There's no real rules to where you put something. It doesn't have to be specifically anywhere or in any order or in any colour. I mean, I try to keep my colours to the same palette for each thing. So I've gone with blues and sort of taupes and greys for this one. But that's my choice because that's the colours I fancy playing with at the moment. It's not particularly something that I'm going to possibly want for my next thing I'm going to do. I could want a bright pink work, and that doesn't matter. No, that's not going to do what I wanted it to. Can I pull that back? Yeah, there we go. Just change it. If I didn't like it, I move it and pull it off again. It's not something that has to be all the time in the same place. Okay, now I've got quite a lot of paper on there now, and as you can see on the original, we've got areas that have been stamped. I'm going to show you how I stamp these now. Now, I don't have a stamp that necessarily has that little bit of that pattern on its own. What I tend to use are stamps that have got those patterns within it. So this one is Bird on a Branch, and it's by Woodware. I don't want the whole stamp, I just want this little bit up here. Okay, and I'm going to be stamping that with the Ground Espresso Distress ink. Okay, so I'm just going to go across. And now you'll notice I've not put it on a block. That's because I'm trying not to use the bit where the bird is, and I don't want it to be perfect. So what I'm looking at is it having a sort of a distressed look before it actually is all finished. So there you can see that's that nice little bit off the top of this stamp, and I'm just using that top part to give me what I'm looking for at the moment. Okay, do this quite often with stamps because it's quite a nice way to use them, and I use them upside down as well because it depends on where they fit. So that's that one. The other one I'm going to use today, or another one of the ones I'm going to use today, this one's Feathers, and it's also a Woodware stamp, and it has a really nice dotty pattern on it, which you'll see when I start to stamp with it. You can't really see it before that, but it has these little dots which are just fabulous. Can you see all these dots turning up now where we're putting things? And it just looks brilliant. And again, I'm not using the whole of it. I'm looking at using parts of it and just doing a little bit of the stamping with it. So it's not about me covering all of the area or with the whole stamp. I'm just using it parts of it. Okay. And then the last one I'm going to use is Be Kind. It's also a Woodware stamp, and it has a beautiful bee on it. And I've used it quite a lot in my art journaling already because I really like the stamp. But I don't want the whole of the bee this time. There's a little bit on the corner that's got hexagons in it, and it just really nicely prints when you do it. So just a nice little bit of a print. So I'm going to put that in on here. And it's got a couple of stamp pieces, so it's quite nice. Okay, I'll do that one there, I think. Yep. And put that up there. So this is bringing my page together a little bit more, making it slightly more cohesive in what it's doing. It's still very busy at this point. There's a lot happening. and we're going to sort of bring that all together and meld it all in when we start spritzing it to bring it back into a whole piece, as it were. So we're going to start to bring that back in now. We've done most of our stamping. There's a little bit of stamping I just want to do there, that bit there, here. It'd be quite nice to do there. There we go. So I'll do a little bit of second generation just to make sure I've used all my ink up and I'm not wasting anything and putting bits on. Right, so this is my stamped piece now. Now I'm going to spritz it. And I like to make my own spritz inks up because I've got all these wonderful things in my craft room that are beautiful pigments, and I'm like, well, why can't I use them? So I do. Now, last week Heidi was showing you pixie powders, which we're used to seeing doing a tap in and sorting out and then a little bit of spritzing on it, and we get this glorious colour. Well, that is beautiful. But if we put that powder into a bottle, I'm going to do it with white because I want to do, it's called a white pearl. I want to use that on this particular one. Now I haven't filled my bottle up. It's not got a lot of water in it, if you can notice. It's only about a quarter full of that. And I'm just going to squirt my mica powders down into it. Okay. And when I've got it how I think I want it, just put my lid back on, give it all a bit of a shake. You see how it's made up this beautiful swirling mica now. You can just see it in there. And it's up to you how dense you want to make it. Don't make loads up because these spritz sprays don't have a preservative in them. So eventually they will either fade or they will start to smell funky. So they are something that they'll last you 2 or 3 months, but you know, so don't fill the bottle up with it because you're not going to get it all used in that time. But it's a nice way of using your other things you've already got. So using pixie powders to do something else as well. So you're not just using them in one thing. And that's another use for them. Okay, so I label what I've done with them. So this one has got bronze blush in it, which is a really nice brown. So when I spray it on it, I will start to get some nice brown bits. And the other one I've used is rich gold, which gives me a real nice glisten, and it gives me some nice thick spots, which I quite like. Okay, and then this is the white pearl, which doesn't leave much behind, but it will leave a shimmer, okay, which is what you're looking for. It's like a dense shimmer. So I'm just going to dry those off, and then we're going to sort the typewriter out to go on as my piece of paper at the end. Okay, just starting to dry it off. I'm using a heat gun to do that because it just makes life a bit quicker. Now, as you can see, because I use distress inks on my stamping, and obviously I've used spritz sprays that have water in, some of the stamping has gone blurred and vintage looking. It's moved. The same with the inks that I did initially with on the backing, so they're blurring through as well. But other than the ones that I use which are permanent, which are the VersaFines, so all the distressing work is starting to sort of meld in together and blend it all in. The same with the other bits. So we've got quite a nice bit there. Now I need to make this look a bit older so it works. So one of the things that I do is I take my distress ink and I'm just going to rub it over very gently over the creases, because they're the bit that would get dirty when you were using it. Okay, now while that ink's wet, I'm just going to crush it again because then it'll put the ink into different places on it. Okay, so now it's looking a little bit more old and worn, and I'm going to glue it down onto my piece here. I think that looks about right there. I quite like it there. Or should I put it on this side this time? No, I'll stay that side. Right, some glue. Now, because I've got this well scrunched up, it's not necessarily going to be very easy for me to get the glue to hold it down. So one of the things I do is I actually use my brayer, and I push it down with my brayer a bit so that it holds it a bit flatter, and you get a better, it sort of like irons it out slightly, but not too much. So it just helps it to get a grab where you need it to be. You'll have to hold it for a couple of minutes because you've messed it about. Okay. Right. Now, the die cuts that I'm using today, which are these, they're so pretty, so delicate it is. It's one of Riverside Crafts die cuts, and it's called Dotty Stem. It cuts beautifully. And I'm really chuffed because it goes through my mini cutter as well. So it goes through my tiny one, which makes life very easy when I'm sat at my desk. I don't have to get up and go and use the Gemini. It uses my nice tidy one. So I'm going to look at where I want to put it. Okay, and this now is bringing in my journey. But as I'm looking at it, I'm sort of thinking I could put something else onto there that I would quite like. So I'm going to have a look at some of my numbers, because I haven't put my numbers on today, and I normally put numbers and things on, or pieces with letters in. Any papers that I've got bits on it that might sort of feel like you should have them on there, you can add at any point. So if you've got something done and you think, well, actually I want a bit more on here, go for it. There's no rules that say you can't. Like, you've got bits that are curling up, just put a bit more glue under the corner and hold them down, and that. So that's that bit. So I'm going to glue this down. Now, if you're just wondering what glue I'm using Pinflair's bookbinding glue. I use this mainly because it's got a nice fine nozzle on it, which means A, I use less glue, but B, I can get in the fiddly bits and not make too much mess, because white glue goes everywhere when anyone can get anywhere near it. This is the best one I've found so far for me controlling what glue goes where, which is an important thing when I'm sticking things down. Right. Okay, I've got a little bit to put on that end there, just to hold that in position. Right, so that's my art journal page completed for me at the moment. Now at this point I'm looking at it thinking it's got nothing, I want to do a little bit more to it. So I'm going to take my stencil again, but it's got a lot of ink on there, so I'm not going to get a lot out of it. I need something that hasn't got it's not an ink base. It's going to give me, raise things up. So this is the stencil paste from Sweet Poppy Stencils, and this one is the white gloss. And what it does is it sort of puts the bright white back on what you're doing and gives you sort of another view of it, if that makes sense. On that. Okay, there's a bit there I don't want on it, so I'm just going to scrape that off. Put that back in, and I'm just going to put a little bit of it down here as well. Okay, take it off there because I don't necessarily want it on that bit. If it hasn't gone how you wanted it, scrape it off and do it again. There isn't a rule that says you can't. So if you don't like it and you want to put it on again, do it. Okay. That's better. Now, when you've got stencil paste on your mylar stencils, you do need to clean them because it will cause a problem otherwise. Now, I've got, these are like a J cloth thing that you buy and they're on a roll. I get them in the cheap shops because they're stronger than a baby wipe. They last longer. I can reuse them for quite a long time with lots of with my inks and things before I have to get rid of them. And then I use a tea towel to dry up with an old one, not one out of the kitchen, I have to say. So it's not one out of my kitchen. It is an old one, I promise. I'm not going to wash up Sunday lunch and dry it up with my tea towel. I'd get into trouble. And that, so now that's got to dry. Now I can dry it off a little bit with my heat gun, which is quite nice. And it will, this one will give me a shimmer. Now it will blister when I heat it. So I can actually give, I can actually make one area have the blistery effect, so that it'll give me a different type of texture to another area, because it will balloon with the heat, which is quite nice. But you'll start to see the shine coming through now. Okay, so art journaling is basically you using whatever colour it is you fancy on that day, so it's going with your mood. You can use all of those scraps and bits and bobs that you've had hanging around that you really like, that's your favourite papers, and you don't know what to do with them because they're not really big enough to do anything. You get to use them in your art journal, which is beautiful and a lovely way of doing it. You can have things that you've written about in your journal, so there's nothing to say you can't use some writing. There's nothing to say you can't draw lines in yourself. You can do your own drawing if you want to. If you're not up to, you don't want to, you use your stamps. I tend to use stamps a lot. I have done some drawing ones, but I do tend to use stamps quite a lot. And I try and do one art journal for a year. So this is obviously the new one for this year. So I have got one, I've got last year's, which is bursting. And this was my first art journal. Okay, so as you can see, it's quite full, has lots of different things in it. I'm just gonna put that there a second to dry. I hadn't done any art journaling before this, so this is all new. So I was learning, and this is all just stamping and stencil work. So it's just learning how to play with them, a little bit of colouring to have a play with, and different cardstocks do different things. So I've used different cardstocks in this while I was learning. And played with different pens to see what happened, and I wrote myself notes about it. So when I've used something I've not used before, I wrote about it, so I've got an idea. If I've got something I wasn't overly fond about, it doesn't really matter, because it was all about me learning. So this is using the rice papers and Mod Podge and things. So I was learning about rice papers and how they worked, and then just found a topper I really liked that I hadn't used anywhere, and put it in with it, so it sort of plays with it. Learning about my spritz inks and what they do, and masking, so that I can go different sort of feelings with it. Playing with pixie powders and making masks, so give me, and again here I'm just doodling, so this is sort of like a brave day, if you like. More pixie powder work. It's one of my favourite things to do. Using what's it called, my brain isn't working today, it's by Pebeo, it's a masking gum, and you put it on first and draw with it, and then when you've done your pixie powders and everything's dry, you rub it and it comes off, and you've got left with the drawing behind in the same colour as your base card. So as you can see, my art journaling has had a very definite journey. Some of it's very stylised, some of it I've had a play at, so that it really has changed as time has gone on, and I've learnt more as I've gone on about it. But as you can see, all different colours on different days, even if it's just something really quick and simple, it's just taking that little bit of time for yourself and drawing and colouring it in, and playing with your stamps, playing with your ideas for cards, all sorts, anything and everything. Having your jelly plate out if you have one, having a go at drawing things and seeing what you think to them. So it's literally all sorts, and everything and anything goes in your art journal. Nothing is wrong, you know, so it's all about you having a bit of a play and just taking a journey. Instead of writing it, you put it down in colour, and it's how you feel about whatever's going on around you, using up your bits that you have in your craft room, oddments of cards, toppers, stamps, all those things that you put away, and all those mediums that you buy, like your pixie powders and your texture paste that you don't know what to do with. Play with them in your art journal, write about what you did on the other page if you want to. And then you've got a diary of how you've done things and how they worked, and you'll get to know whether or not you like that. But it's just a bit of fun, and now just how I really enjoy spending an afternoon just playing with my art journal. And I hope that's helped you this today, and I hope I've sort of given you some ideas about how you can use all your oddments up and do collage work, and also using your pixie powders as a spritzer spray. You know, we sell bottles quite all sorts of sizes and bits, and it's a nice way of doing them. I mean, I have all sorts of them that I've done using different colours to make them up, because it's just a great way of giving myself a spritz ink with something I've already got and a bit of water. And if they lose their colour, then I just wash it all out and start again. And I have to say, as yet, I haven't managed to use a whole bottle of pixie powders, and I do use them rather a lot. So the fact that I haven't actually managed to empty a bottle says a lot about how much you use for what you're doing. But I hope this has been helpful. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you again in a few weeks. Take care. Thank you. Bye bye.